Welcome back to On Texas Football, the weekly edition of Texas versus the SEC, brought to you by MyBookie. I'm CJ Vogel, joined as always by Gerry Hamilton. A busy week in the SEC again, 2 ranked matchups across the board. We'll dive into some of Texas's future opponents. Obviously, the Longhorns will host the Florida Gators, 21-point favorites. And before we get into all of that, Gerry, a quick word about our sponsor, MyBookie.
Yeah, this episode of On Texas Football is brought to you by the folks at MyBookie. Make sure you're in the game with MyBookie. Play any matchup, hundreds of college player props, and more. With all the excitement of the season, make sure you're in the game with MyBookie. Bet any matchup, hundreds of college player props, and take advantage of weekly risk-free bets. The best part is you can do it all, anytime, anywhere, straight from your phone. Visit mybookie.ag and use promo code ONTEXAS to get started. It's MyBookie's 10th year anniversary, and they're rolling out the red carpet for bettors. Big bet big and bet confident with risk-free Thursdays. It's if your boosted bet doesn't hit, you'll get your money back. Weekly no sweat win-win bets all season long. And sign up now using my On Texas to cash in on a double deposit bonus. It's a no-brainer. Double the cash in your account before you ever place your first bet. But do not wait because it's only available for a limited time. For those who have been playing with MyBookie, they've got something for you as well. A brand new loyalty rewards program in MyBookie Plus, all caps. It's simple. The more you play, the more you earn. And as you progress through the tiers, unlock exclusive promotions, epic giveaways, and cash back in your account.
Perfect. Thank you, Gerry, and thank you, MyBookie. Speaking of betting lines, Gerry, Texas comes into this game as a 21.5-point favorite over Florida. The over-under set at 47 feels a little low, but considering Florida's quarterback situation, considering the Texas defense, it sounds about right now that I'm talking myself into it. But let me get your immediate thoughts on this game because we're both going to give our score predictions coming up here soon. 21 points for the Longhorns. Does that feel right coming into this game?
It feels a little high to me, even if DJ Lagway has some exploratory new treatment and he's back to 100% after being carted off the field and having crutches under his armpits. It still feels a little high to me. I think Florida's got good athletes. Now they're banged up in the secondary. And if Lagway plays, it's going to be limited. Montrell Johnson hasn't been 100% this season. Eugene Wilson, their best receiver, is now out for the season. It seems, even with all that said, it seems like a high number. It seems like we're thinking like this is the worst Florida team ever. And in reality, I don't think that's the case. I think they're still a pretty good football team, but they're probably going to be playing with their third-string quarterback. So I don't like Texas to cover this, and we'll get into the score, but I do think it could be close.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really interesting. What Texas offense comes to play in this game, of course, what level of Quinn Ewers do you have? And you know, that offensive line, did that bye week clear up a lot? Because if it did, and I think it's one of those things where if Texas can get up early, what kind of fight do you see late from Florida? You know, they're coming in a 3-score underdog. You're on your third-string quarterback most likely. What's to fight for right now after just coming off an emotional, high-intensity loss against one of your big rivals, Georgia, last week in Jacksonville, where it felt like Florida played above its standards. And I know they lost by 2 scores, but that was a closer game than I think most anticipated coming into that game. What kind of fight will Florida have? What kind of, passion will you see for Billy Napier's guys when, you're about to fall to 4-5, most likely should everything go right for Texas?
But Billy got to show a confidence so he's safe. If we know anything about AD's putting out a statement saying this guy's going to be your coach, it's 100% true, right?
Take that to the bank. That always means job security, Gerry.
Or 90% you're fired in 5 weeks. So, I mean, one of the two, take your pick. But you brought up a great point on the energy. Sometimes a young quarterback that's an exciting player energizes a team and a program. And I think that was starting to happen with DJ Lagway. And then he gets hurt. And then they get other players hurt on top of the injuries they already had. So how much energy as a program are they really bringing into this game? That's the question. Now, guys are playing for NFL draft status, all those things. Nowadays, if you're presented an opportunity and you bust through the door, it may mean a great NIL deal at the school you're at or somewhere else. So there's always things to play for. But as a team, where's your energy level really at? That DJ Lagway injury might have taken some wind out of them. I don't think it was their dead cat bounce, but it might have taken some wind out of them.
Yeah, I agree because, again, to your point, he was, nationally acclaimed coming out of high school, right? He was a Gatorade Player of the Year. He comes in, and we had seen him, kind of sporadically throughout the early parts of the season, and it felt like he was one of those guys that could instantly throw a touchdown with the deep pass immediately upon stepping foot on the field, or find ways to put points on the board with his legs. And so that was encouraging the sense of Florida finding maybe a spark plug for their offense. I'll stick on that offensive line because I heard Sarkisian talk about this Thursday morning with his final availability. That offensive line, Gerry, is big in their physical. And for a team that likes to, kind of set the tone via the running game with Montreal Johnson coming back, Jacoby Jackson, they got some guys in that running back room right now. Ball's the other one, 13 combined rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
How does that shake out for the Longhorns in their rush defense, which if there was a weak point on this Texas defense, it would probably be on the interior, especially without Brennan Broughton. Room for concern right now going into Saturday?
Yes, I think the key for Texas in this game, as always, have to get past turnovers. Look, you just can't have a sloppy game. It's first down defense, and there's really going to be first down run defense and perimeter passing defense. If Texas plays well against the run on early down in this game, I think Florida's up against it if Warner's the quarterback. I really do. The other thing there, CJ, that I want to point out was Florida's talked about, we've caused 6 interceptions the last 2 weeks. And not if you watched the Kentucky game, by the way. So Vandergriff missed, they tied in on a wide open crosser, threw it way back behind him, tip ball interception. Berrien Brown dropped the 25-yard in route that would have been a first down right through his hands and into a Florida defender. Carson Beck has not been good with the football. So I wanted to point that out. I didn't point it out earlier. So that's a miss. Some of the stats going into games are misleading, and that's one of them. On the Florida offensive line, follow the right guard, Damian George, number 70. Where he's moved in the last 2 or 3 games is where the run game's going. So that's something for the Texas fans. Watch big number 70 at right guard.
That's a good little nugget right there, Gerry. Of course, we've gone through the offense, the defense, what's going to be the difference maker here. Let me get your score prediction as well. We talked about 21 points. That's a lot to cover. I think we might differ on this. Where do you have Texas and Florida ending up when, the clock's hit 0 on Saturday?
So I've been at 34-17. I'm going to bump that back to 34-16. And look, I'm betting since Texas hasn't played a clean football game offensively, and they've turned it over in their own territory or turned it over multiple times, it's hard for me to sit here and say, oh, Texas is just going to go back to playing clean football. And so I'm going 34-16, touchdown, 3 field goals, because Smack's a good kicker for Florida. Yeah. So I'm going 34-16, not quite to cover the 21.5, but I do like Texas to have a considerable victory against a quality opponent. Florida's a quality opponent playing the toughest schedule in the country. If Florida was playing A&M's schedule, they'd win 7.5 to 8 games. This is a tough schedule.
It's a good perspective, right? That schedule is, in, the middle of the hardest 4-game gauntlet you'll see maybe ever, right? And for that reason, again, if Texas gets up early, which they haven't done recently again, if they're able to do that, what's the fight shown, especially on a third-string quarterback that hasn't shown much at all? I believe only 9 of 25 passing this year. I'm going 38-13. That's the final score that I kind of came up with. Again, I'm not saying Texas is absolutely going to blow out Florida. That would be a bit presumptuous considering what we've seen on the field the last 3 games. But right now, I think this is a good opportunity for that Texas passing attack to find some level of confidence. We've talked about the injuries Florida's dealing with right now. If you can't find it this week and you can't find it in Fayetteville, this just might be who Texas is now. I'm not ready to believe that just yet, and for that reason, I think this is a game in which you see Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden, and DeAndre Moore get loose vertically down the field. If that's the case, Texas wins big. 38-13, that feels right for me. So that's going to do it for Texas and Florida, Gerry. Plenty of other big games going on across the SEC. And before we dive into those ranked matchups, I wanted to go down the list real quick of Texas opponents remaining. And we'll talk about Oklahoma coming up here soon, but this is important because we're watching Texas enter phase 3. They got 4 games in November, whereas other SEC opponents maybe have a bye week coming up. Maybe they've got a FCS opponent on the schedule left, Texas still has a good chunk of its SEC schedule remaining. And I wanted to point this out. Texas A&M off this weekend. Kentucky off this weekend. Arkansas also off this weekend. All three of Texas's future opponents remaining in the SEC schedule not playing this weekend.
Yeah, no, that's big actually. A&M, that means their staff's going to be on the road recruiting in the state of Texas this weekend, right? At high school games, last regular season games around the country. Arkansas is the most, I guess, important this to talk about now. They have the week off before Texas, and that's huge because Taylor Green probably couldn't go if they were playing this week. And so he gets a week off. They get Jaquindon Jackson healthy. And I'm not going to sit here and say Sam Pittman's coaching for his job against Texas because he's already had a big win and he's won 5 games this year. But he said it in the SEC media days. This is the Super Bowl. This is it. Texas is rolling the Fayetteville. So it's going to be kitchen sink time. They're preparing for Texas for 2 weeks. Everything they have at their disposal, getting guys healthy, trick plays, anything Bobby Petrino hadn't called, all of it. Arkansas is getting prepared for Texas next week in Fayetteville. It's a big game for Texas, obviously, but for Sam Pittman, it may be just as big a game next week. Then Kentucky, that's also key because they have as many injuries as anybody in the SEC. And J.J. Weaver, their best edge guy, missed last week. So they have to get healthier. Beyond the Texas game, their last 3 games, I mean, they're on a bad slide. They're not playing good offensive football. I think they have some quarterback issues. So getting a week off for them right now before their final 3 games is really important as well, because you got to remember one of their 3 games at the end is Louisville in a rivalry game. So they don't have FCS. They got real dudes coming up. So it's key from a Kentucky injury standpoint because they need to get healthier because that's really impacted them this year. But Arkansas is the big one. And for the Texas fans here, A&M staff will be on the road and recruiting in the state of Texas, probably seeing some of the targets that Texas saw last week.
Yeah, good points there. Of course, the one thing that stands out to me about Arkansas is that 1 week to just kind of recruit mentally, right?
Yes.
Recovery is going to be key, but that Arkansas team has allowed 97 points over its last 2 home games. Now, you can expect that environment to maybe be ramped up a little bit against Texas whenever the Longhorns go up to Fayetteville. But the point being, they've got some issues that they needed to address, and this bye week will give them some sort of stability walking into Texas with 2 weeks to recover. But beyond that, all 3 opponents rested up for 1 week further than the Longhorns into the season. That'll wrap it up for the future opponents talk. One other team I wanted to discuss real quick, Gerry. How important of a game is it for Oklahoma this weekend? 5-4 in conference play. That line's kind of shifted back and forth from 3 points as an underdog for Oklahoma to 3 points as a favorite, and it might end up as a true pick 'em. But they're going on the road to Missouri. Is this the game? Is this the last opportunity Oklahoma has to become bowl eligible this year?
Well, yeah, I think so because, like you said, Alabama and then at LSU. So it's a tough close for Oklahoma. By the way, I need to say something first. Kentucky does have Murray State before Texas. So they do have an off week and then somewhat of an off week before Texas and then Louisville to end. But yeah, for Oklahoma, look, Brady Cook to me is the whole deal in this game. Where's Brady Cook's health for Missouri? They have not had the season they envisioned. They still have 2 losses, right? They're technically 2 SEC losses. So they're hanging around, but it's not the season they envisioned. Brady Cook did not go against Alabama. Where's he at this week? If Brady Cook plays and he's healthy enough, I have a hard time picking Oklahoma over Missouri. Oklahoma's just had so many injuries at wide receiver, and the offensive line's still not good. Even Missouri might be able to take advantage of that a little bit. But I do think I'm worried about Missouri's offensive line against Oklahoma's defense. But in terms of the overall picture, for Brent Venables, this is a huge game because he does not. He can't go 5-7 in year 3. I'm not saying they would fire him at 5-7 this year. I'm not saying they wouldn't. But what I am saying is if he went 5-7 this year and lost 3 games in a row to end the season and didn't make a bowl game, he has 0 margin for error in year 4. 0. And can you hire the offensive coordinator you want at 5-7? Because if I'm saying it, if they go try to call Will Stein, I know what he's thinking. I don't know about that.
I
I don't
agree.
know about that. I'm at a place that's winning right now. Why would I go to Oklahoma when I can just sit here and get a Power 4 head coaching job?
Because
I
that's on
mean,
the horizon.
yeah. I mean, so that's going to be the hard thing is if they lose out, if Oklahoma doesn't show any signs of life here late in the season, and it's 5-7, not only is Brent Venables on a very hot seat next year, I'm not sure he can go get the OC he ideally wants in that scenario.
And beyond that, what happens at quarterback? Because it's
Yep.
kind of been a mismanagement of both. And now you kind of run the risk of both headed out the door at the end of the season. We'll see, obviously, what might happen there. Also, big recruiting inflammation there, with Michael Fasusi and what ends up happening with Bedenball. That whole offensive staff is basically the point there. But to me, this is their last chance to become bowl eligible again. You took care of Maine. The offense looked capable. I know it's Maine, but that was the best version of the Oklahoma offense that we had seen the entire year. It took 10 weeks to get to that point. But, hey, if there's any sort of momentum right now, it's obviously because of that performance. So we'll see what happens there. Other places in the SEC, 2 ranked matchups that we need to discuss because right now, Gerry, listen, we've talked about it. There's 5 teams still alive with 1 loss in the SEC championship game hunt. The logjam up at the top. Georgia, Texas A&M, Tennessee, LSU, Texas. That's where it's at right now. A couple of those teams, Georgia, I mean, they get to go to Oxford. They're facing off with Ole Miss. LSU, they get to host Alabama. Now, Georgia's a 3-point favorite on the road in Oxford. And then LSU, a 3-point underdog at home in Death Valley. Those 2 teams, do they survive the weekend is the big question.
Yeah, so one thing I'm not going to do in this show or at any point is look at the Ole Miss injury report and believe anything I'm looking at, okay? I mean, it looks like a high school football team, a whole roster they just put up. It's like, they have injury issues at running back at Ole Miss, and they have Trey Harris as doubtful, which would be meaningful. Obviously, the tight end Prescorn is back to probable, along with 78 other scholarship players, but I'm not looking at that. Let's just bypass that. And let's just say 90% of those guys are going to play for them and play well. Then it gets down to Carson Beck in this game. Georgia's defense will be up for this game. They get both their safeties back who missed the first half against Florida, by the way. And that hadn't been talked about enough. They both got targetings against Texas and missed the first half of that Florida game. So I don't think that was talked about enough. Going in or after that game and how that could affect their defense and Florida Lagway early throwing it down the field. But Carson Beck, if he plays anything like he did against Texas, and Texas, he hit some receivers, then they dropped the ball, right? On a couple of 6 drops around 3rd downs, maybe that was. But if he doesn't start playing at a higher level, then you can lose a game like this because Jackson Dart has confidence. Now, is Ole Miss going to be able to throw it down the field against Georgia? If they pass protect better than Texas, people can still get deep on Georgia. Florida did it last week, and Texas just didn't have the opportunity.
Yeah.
But Jackson Dart throws it down the field outside the numbers.
Yeah.
CJ, so if they pass pro, I think they're going to score on Georgia. And I'm not sitting there saying they're going to score 35 or 40. I'm not saying that. But I do think Lane Kiffin will go vertical a lot in this game if his pass protection holds up because there's enough on tape to where people have beat Georgia deep. And then you watch Texas say, guys, if we handle pass protection, we're going to have opportunities here. I guess I lean to Georgia. Man, I'm going to say 31-24. I mean, 30-24, maybe a defensive touchdown mixed in for Georgia. I'm going to lean to Georgia because the last time I doubted them, they were on the road in Austin, and I know it's a little different scenario, but Kirby seems like his team's got a us against the world mentality, and you can really only get up for like 3 games a year doing that.
Yeah, that's one of the things where until Kirby Smart in Georgia completely falls off, I feel like, and this is just the dumb brain in me, I should be picking Georgia to defeat Ole Miss every single time that they play. The difference is with this game, one quarterback just threw for 515 and the other one has 11 picks in his last 5 games. So if there is, I don't want to say an advantage because you have to take into account the Georgia defense, but confidence on one side versus the other, I would have to assume it's Lane Kiffin and Jackson Dart playing at a higher level of confidence than what we'll see from Carson Beck. But again, we've seen Carson Beck overcome a really bad first half against Alabama to make that game very close at the end. We've seen him overcome 2 or 3 interceptions early against Texas, to which he still found ways to put points on the board against Texas on the road. Composure is something that is always going to be a part of his game. Will he have enough of that and that confidence to take care of the rock against Ole Miss on the road? We'll see. He's been tested enough this year to know what he can and cannot do on the road in these games. But moving on to Death Valley, because that's another tough place to play. Gerry, LSU sitting there at 3-1. Alabama right outside of that bunch, 3-2 in conference play right now. Alabama comes in as the favorite. LSU obviously just took the big hit against Texas A&M on the road. LSU, 1 loss in conference play. Are they still in this conversation for the trip to Atlanta after this weekend?
This is a really tough game for me.
It's a coin flip for me.
It is a coin flip game. And look, that home field has been big in that game for LSU. I think Nussmeier, despite having 9 interceptions, he's had to take some risks with the football. I think he's playing at a high level. I'm going to go with LSU in this game. And this may sound crazy because I'm going with Nussmeier over Milroe in this game. And I don't know why. I just don't have a feel for this game. LSU's lost so many key guys to injury, but they've rallied enough defensively. My concern for LSU is how A&M was successful running the ball in the second half.
Bingo.
That's my concern. That's my concern, CJ, because one thing Kalen DeBoer's not is an arrogant coach that's going to say, yeah, they have their success, but I'm going to do my stuff over here. No, he's not an arrogant coach like that. If he sees a way to win a game, he's going to try to do it.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. Listen, I said it before this week, even after the A&M game, I thought Garrett Nussmeier was playing at a level way above other quarterbacks in the SEC. I think Diego Pavia was doing that to an extent with what he can do at Vanderbilt, right? A little limited with his weapons, but Nussmeier specifically, with the way that he had kind of put LSU on his back in some of those games, and to your point, the interceptions, you can point to that and say, but he's had to do that. He's had to sling the rock because, well, you're relying on a freshman running back for the most part after the injuries to some running backs earlier this year. Your defense is allowing a lot of points because of injuries on that side of the ball. He's had to put the cape on more times than probably desired this year at LSU. And to all of his contests so far, with the exception of that second half against A&M, I think he's answered the call. Obviously, what can they do at LSU to take advantage of the week off? Side note, Alabama also had a week off. So both of these teams coming in well rested. I'll take the home team here. I like LSU. I like Nussmeier. But with that said, I like the point that you brought up, Gerry, about what can Alabama expose from that LSU defense with the running game from the quarterback. A&M kind of set the blueprint off right there in terms of how to move the ball explosively right there. Real quick, before I get your final thoughts on the college football playoff picture, Gerry, a quick word about MyBookie, our sponsor for this weekend's Texas versus the SEC.
Yeah, with all the excitement of the season, make sure you're in the game with MyBookie. Bet any matchup, hundreds of college player props, and take advantage of the weekly risk-free bets. The best part is you can do it all, anytime, anywhere, straight from your phone. Visit mybookie.ag and use promo code ONTEXAS to get started. It's MyBookie's 10th year anniversary, and they rolled out the red carpet for bettors. Bet big and bet confident with risk-free Thursdays. If your boosted bet doesn't hit, you'll get your money back. Weekly, no sweat, win-win bets all season long.
Perfect. Thank you, Gerry, and thank you again, MyBookie, for sponsoring Texas versus the SEC. All right, last point of this episode of the show. College football playoff. The first rankings were released. 4 SEC teams made the cut, the top 12. But the point I wanted to make here might also extend into what their outlook might look like should they fall again this year. 4 teams in the top 12, but there's 7 in the top 16. You got Texas A&M, LSU, and Ole Miss right outside of that top 12 cut. Let me get your thoughts on the 7 in the top 16, but also that kind of leeway, if you will, for Texas if they were to fall again at some point this season.
Well, the big thing this weekend is it's an elimination game as it stands right now. As it stands today, a 3-loss team from the SEC or Big Ten is not getting in the playoff. But that could change if Notre Dame gets upset. If Notre Dame gets upset by, say, USC at the end of the year, 2 losses for them, they're out because they lost to Northern Illinois. So they're down to it. They got to win out. Clemson losing was big. The 2 Big 12s losing last week was big. Kansas State at Houston, that's a tough one. Then Iowa State against Texas Tech. So it leans to 1 Big 12 making it. And so one that we were thinking 2 could make it before the upsets last week, and now we're thinking 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're thinking with Clemson losing, if SMU runs the table, goes to 11-1, and happens to lose to Miami, they don't get in at 11-2 over a 10-2 SEC team. So right now, it looks good for the SEC getting 4 in. That brings us to this weekend. Alabama and LSU both have 2 losses on the season. Knockout game. As it currently stands, a knockout game. Ole Miss has to win out to think they have a real shot at it. That means they have to win against Georgia this weekend. If Ole Miss beats Georgia, then Georgia plays the Tennessee game with 2 losses, not being able to lose another game. I mean, it's so we're getting some knockouts. There's 7 in the top 16 this week. There won't be next week because either Alabama or LSU is going to lose. And if Georgia wins against Ole Miss, then that's a 3rd loss for Ole Miss, and they're going to get knocked down in the playoff ranking. So it's interesting to see how this works out. Texas is sitting in a great spot if they win the next 3 and can go into A&M 10-1. I think they're in no matter what if they can go into A&M at 10-1. If you lose that game at 10-2, we'll get the University of Texas in the playoff.
Yeah,
because A&M's going to probably advance on to an SEC championship game in that scenario. But CJ, I don't know if I'm missing something on that, but that's where I come out on it. 2 teams are going to end up. One team's going to end up with 3 losses, and they're pretty much out. And then you have Georgia and Ole Miss. If Ole Miss loses, they have 3 losses. They're pretty much out. So it's really getting down to it this week, starting this weekend, are pretty much playoff elimination games as it stands today.
Can I throw a curveball on this?
Do it, please. I need one.
Missouri.
Yeah.
6-2. They're not necessarily in contention for the SEC title game, right? You lost big to Texas A&M. You lost big to Alabama, but you're 6-2 and you got 4 games left. You got Oklahoma at home. You go to South Carolina. Let's say you win that game. Now you got Mississippi State on the road, and you end up with Arkansas at home. On paper, that seems like they're winnable for Missouri. Obviously, they've not played great in big games this year, but at 10-2 in Missouri, are we completely dismissing them because of how they've played against tough teams so far this year for the playoff?
I definitely am, and I probably shouldn't, but I am. I think the issue they have is they have bad style points. Like if they
hang their hat?
Yeah. I mean, they lost 41-10 at A&M, and they lost 34-0. And now Drinkwitz will say Brady Cook didn't play. I get it, but they lost by 31 at A&M, and it was an ugly loss.
Yep.
Alabama's an ugly loss. So they have an issue if there's, let's just say, they're
stacking resumes. If
they're bunched in 3 SEC teams that are all 10-2 for 2 spots, they're probably not getting the spot.
I agree.
Just looking at the resumes and how they've lost, that to me, that's going to be their issue.
I agree. But we'll see as the picture starts to get a little clearer after this week. Of course, Texas has to take care of business against Florida at home. But that 11 o'clock slate allows them to kind of sit back, kick their feet up, and see where the dominoes fall for the rest of the week, and then start to prepare for the road trip up to Fayetteville after that. So, of course, we'll have you all updated with the latest coverage, recruiting, and team here at On Texas Football. For my bookie, for Gerry Hamilton, and for myself, CJ Vogel, this has been On Texas Football, Texas versus the SEC. Welcome.